regrets. I've had a few. Now, if any of you weren't here for the beginning of the session, that's probably the most bizarre thing you've ever seen in your life. But I'm here to talk to you today about something I'm passionate about. I've been involved in sustainability in construction for more than 15 years. I've got to say, 15 years ago, talking about sustainability in construction was a bit like wetting yourself in a dark suit. Nobody noticed, but it gave you a warm feeling inside. So what a fantastic treat to come here today and see an audience that is engaged and passionate about the same subject as me. But I work for an organisation which is intensely practical. We are pragmatic. We are a company which is, like all PLCs, dedicated to making a profit. So what I want to talk to you today is about things which are doable. I'm going to talk in very plain language, because the sort of things we have to talk about is to the person on the Edinburgh bus, as someone described before. We don't want to talk about obtuse scientific technology verbosity, which nobody understands. We have to be able to create an upsurge in demand, which will be genuinely game-changing. So let's look at some of the challenges that have been outlined in Low Carbon Scotland, in RPP2, and there they are. We've talked about these. One of the worst things about speaking later in the day, it's a bit like, you know, those last few moments in your life where you see your life flashing through in 30 seconds. I've seen all my slides at least 10 times, so I shall concentrate on the ones that you haven't seen before. But I think it's really important to understand where we are now, where we start from, and where we need to get to. Because that's one of the things I think we're overlooking. And certainly when we start to look at who we address, then the last speaker for the first time mentioned what for me is the key area, and that's me and you, ladies and gentlemen, owner-occupiers, which make up 60% of the homeowners here in Scotland, and in the UK, 65% of housing stock, and the growing sector, which is the private rented sector. Now, the thing which will change the minds of people who are owner-occupiers, and if you're one, you'll understand this, is money. Is money. I'd love to think we can tell people that they're saving the planet and force both purchasing and behaviour change through that, but I'm wise enough and old enough to know that it's actually financial. That's the way we can change people's behaviour. Yes, we've certainly got some issues in terms of fuel poverty. I think this is a moral issue, frankly. I cannot see how any sophisticated society can let people live in cold conditions, and particularly when we have means of stopping it. But this is still the case, and despite the pledges some decade ago that we would have tackled fuel poverty by 2016, it remains an ever-increasing and spiralling issue. The other issue I want to talk about is where properties are, because the solutions that we suggest, of course, will be hugely complicated by where they are, by where they're located, whether they are on or off gas grid, whether in rural situations, and the nature of the properties themselves, of course. If it's an old house without a cavity, then there's going to be a requirement for either external wall insulation or internal wall information. So we have a raft of different products. And the reason that I'm painting this situation is to say there is no one solution. Lots of things we've talked about today are really good. We can talk about heating networks, which are fantastic in some areas, but impossible in others. And what we have to do is to hit on some sort of strategy which gives everybody a chance to participate. And I believe in this fundamentally because unless we can get everybody involved in the answer, it's always going to be somebody else's problem. Our worst scenario is this becomes a niche, this becomes a ghetto, the environmental ghetto. So this is something that we all have to address and we all can address. We've seen some of the suggestions that the grid will be decarbonised, which will, of course, promote any electrical devices, and that we're going to have a step change in terms of energy-efficient homes, defined very eloquently in the Sustainable Housing Strategy. And the thing I like most are hard targets. I work for a commercial company. I have hard targets. If I don't hit my hard targets, I get sacked. Here's some hard targets that we have to hit. Every home will have loft and cavity wall insulation. A bold target, where possible, of course. Every home heated with gas heating to have a highly efficient boiler with appropriate controls. A high target. And at least 100,000 homes to have some form of renewable heat technology. So how are we doing on this journey? Let's start with the big one, boilers. 90% of homes in the UK are heated using a boiler, 85% of them with gas as the principal fuel. You can see here in Scotland, and these are figures taken from the Scottish Home Condition Survey, you can see that at 2013, 43% of housing had condensing boilers fitted, meaning that we still have 60% to tackle. So a serious issue, no doubt. Also, some of those condensing boilers might not be hitting the compliance standards. In terms of renewables, then the Energy Saving Trust estimates that 10,800 microheat technologies have been installed in 2012. Most recently, we've seen the evidence of the effect of the renewable heat scheme, which is going at the moment, grant assisting the installation of, I should say, rewarding the installation of renewable heat technologies through a tariff paid per kilowatt hour of heat generated. And there you can see the effect in different parts of Scotland in different regions. A good step forward, but one which is still a long way from hitting those targets of 100,000 homes. And of course, and perhaps most importantly, the state of our estate. We have the most mature housing stock in Europe, bar none. You can see 20% of our homes were built over 100 years ago, and 50% were built more than 50 years ago. And the old adage, they don't build them like they used to, thank God for that. Because they're awful. They leak, they're single-skinned, and many of them are in very poor states of repair. Now that sounds like, they used to call me the harbinger of doom. Everyone was depressed when they'd heard a presentation from me. But there is, we think, an answer. And this is our answer, okay? It's intervention by degree. It means that we have to have an option for everyone. And again, you'll excuse my simplicity of language, but at the bottom, the largest potential reach, which could reach the largest number of both householders and lessees, would be do what we can with what we've got. So what does that mean? It could mean the installation of a good set of controls. It could mean making sure that our systems are maintained properly, that we have additives in the system. The largest working part of any heating system is actually the water circulating around it. Things like high efficiency pumps, and of course insulation and glazing to make sure that we leak as little heat as possible. Now, some of those measures, ladies and gentlemen, could be really low-cost measures. And I'd just like to illustrate that with some fantastic work that BEMA, let's have another acronym. I don't think we've had enough acronyms this afternoon. BEMA, who's the professional organisation for controls, heating controls, they've done a brilliant bit of work at the University of Salford where they built a house inside a building. Now, the benefits of that is they can control exactly the environmental conditions. Now, they ran 3 test experiments with a very, very poorly insulated home, a solid wall home of a terrace nature. It's based on the Manchester house. And they ran 3 sets of experiments, the first one of which they just had a time control on a boiler, which was controlled with the thermostat in the boiler. They ran the standard SAP model for central heating in terms of time. They then repeated the experiment, but with the addition of a thermostat, a room thermostat that you could purchase for 20 quid for the most simple mechanical room thermostat. And they then repeated the experiment again with the addition of thermostatic radiator valves. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the savings in pounds from the uncontrolled to the controlled with thermostats and TRVs was 40%. 40%. Why wouldn't you do that? That's something everyone can do. A TRV in your local plumb centre, and where else would you go, let's be honest, is 15 quid. 15 quid. You want one? Yeah. Let me give you another case. What do you think your biggest electricity use is? Any suggestions? Xbox was what I had before. Good one, yeah. Are you ready? Central heating pump. What? Yes, your central heating pump. Why? Because it's on 8 to 10 hours a day. So an old single-speed pump, and ladies and gentlemen, 12 million of you have one of these. An old single-speed pump has 2 speeds, on, off. When it's on, it's consuming about 110 watts. A modern variable speed pump recognizes when the system has started and modulates back. It runs at between 4 and 5 watts. So typically in a year, with a fixed speed pump, you'd be paying about £126 a year to run your pump. A variable speed pump, £8. Why wouldn't you do that? You will now. Plumb Centre is still open, by the way. If you Okay, so there's my first intervention. My second one is perhaps a more ambitious one. But the point is, ladies and gentlemen, if we can get people to take the first step, then they're incrementally more likely to take the second step, which is a bigger capital outlay. It takes a bit more thinking and a bit more guts. But if I can show my savings against what I've done, then maybe I will look at a new boiler or perhaps a renewable heating device, perhaps a heat pump or a biomass boiler. And then lastly, of course, the most expensive, which is the one which would be most value, but unfortunately takes the most capital, and that will be the least attractive for that reason. So there we think we have something for everyone, and that means we're starting to change behavior and to get people engaged in the story. How do we do that? Well, we can't do it alone, that's for sure. We need to have all the people in this room working together towards the same goal, and it must involve both public and private sector. But it is a very, very complex supply chain. And our point is that we have a daily conversation with 120,000 gas-safe installers which are out there fitting heating every day. We run training centres to help them to upskill, to get into new technologies, to do competent person schemes and achieve accreditations. We talk to manufacturers like Mitsubishi, so we could go both upstream and downstream. We believe we can be a catalyst in this and make a few bob, because that's how we're judged. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen. I think this is a unique proposition and one that I would recommend to the House. Were I in a House? I think we've got a fantastic opportunity in Scotland because, frankly, you have the ambition to do it. Our 53 branches throughout Scotland would be delighted to participate in it, and we believe we have the lowest impact supply chain to allow us to deliver this in a low carbon way. there we are, ladies and gentlemen. I'd just like to end up with a little ditty that I repeat on a regular basis, because people say to me, Tim, the actions of a single person can't make a difference. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the only thing that ever will. Thank you.